afternoon, fellow citizens. Welcome back to the Citizens Chat Show. My name is Masesa Demiano. Another episode into the year, and this is, of course, the third episode that we run into the year. And thank you for being part of these conversations every Friday at 4 p.m. We are here. Of course, don't hesitate to just go to our social media handles on the Chat Show UG. That's where I have our conversations running on the hashtag on Twitter, Chat Show UG. But also go to our YouTube channel, Civic Space TV. Subscribe, just hit that subscribe button and be part of the conversation. And today, I'm privileged and of course honored to be hosting the brains in the country that will have a conversation on the key political events that of course dominate and will dominate 2022. And of course to discuss this on my panel, I have, let me start from here once again. Welcome back, Ndugu Awich Pollar. Awich Pollar is of course, the Director of External Services with the NRM. Awich, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And from Awich Pollar is Sarah Bireete, the Executive Director with the Center for Constitutional Governance. Sarah, you're welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon, viewers.
And of course, our big and maiden appearance today is the Right Honorable retired Colonel Dr. Kiiza Besigye.
You can also call him Right Honorable.
You're welcome, Colonel.
Thank you very much. Great pleasure to be on the Citizens Chat Show.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, for you, you didn't know to be introduced because literally everyone knows. Yeah. Then finally is Godber Tumushabe. Of course, is the Associate Director with the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies. Godber, welcome.
Yeah, pleasure to be here, and good evening, our viewers.
Yeah, thank you very much. And of course, right into the conversation, allow me to start with Kano, and being your maiden appearance. Kano, you've been the leading voice, of course, insofar as the alternative approach to management of COVID-19 is concerned, of course, with the public health. The question is, what would we have done better in the management of COVID-19 pandemic, and was it necessary to close schools for over the 2 years? Of course, we're on record to have been the highest, the longest closed schools in the world.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, now I believe with the 2 years of COVID on our globe, most people are now generally better informed about what this is and how we have now the benefit of how the different countries, different regions of the world have managed this and how they have fared. And so, you know, what could have been done better is, I believe, clear to all those who follow the trends regarding this pandemic. The tragedy of the management of the pandemic in Uganda was, as I tried hard to point out right from the beginning, the absence of a plan along which we would proceed in the management of this, which would take into account what to do with education, what to do with the health sector itself, the sector that was at the center of managing the pandemic, what to do with the economy that indeed has been ravaged by the pandemic, and the other different things, how, you know, the sectors that were variously involved. Now, we must really thank and praise God as the African continent, not just as Uganda, for having generally passed off lightly in terms of the impact. Because first of all, we were the least prepared in terms of responding to any health emergency. We don't have any health care system. Uganda especially, I have pointed this out, that we do not have at all a health care system. We have health care some semblance of institutions, but which do not work as a system. A healthcare system is a system that oversees the health of citizens from conception, from when a person is conceived in a mother's womb up to death, that you have a system that follows you through and mainly aimed at making sure that you don't become sick. A healthcare system is not to treat people. Primarily, it is to prevent, it is to maintain health so that you are not sick. And then, of course, if you fall through and become sick, that you have the attention that you need. Now, we don't have a healthcare system. I don't believe that any of us is recorded anywhere in the healthcare system that if you got an accident getting out of here, somebody will just tap a button and understand your blood group, how
Medical
old
history.
you are, what accidents you have had in your history, and so on and so forth. We don't have anything. So if you go to a healthcare provider, they start from scratch to find out who you are, what to do with you. And so once you don't have a healthcare system and you get a pandemic like we got, you are in trouble. So the fact that Africa as a whole, as a continent, has fared best in terms of the numbers of death, the morbidity, the people who became sick and so on, is really by the God's grace. It's not by our doing. Now, having said that, here, the absence of a plan meant that, we did not know what to do at what stage. That's why even the schools you are talking about, nobody knew what it would take, what needs to be done before kids can go back to school. So that once you tick the boxes and they have been done, then kids can go back to school. Nobody knew. That's why even eventually when they said, you go back, they sent them home again after 1 week. Because there had not been a basis on which they had sent them. In fact, now when they are sending them back to school, it's at a peak of another wave of the pandemic. And there is you cannot say that because of these parameters, this is now why we are saying. So the absence of a plan was a total disaster in our case. Secondly, because we do not have an infrastructure, what is being reported is nonsensical to say that, we have had so many positives. Because positives, if you want to know the spread of the virus in the community, then you must have a scientifically designed process that will give you what is happening in the population. Again, part of the plan. We did not have that. So what you see that they are reporting are people who are tested at the airport, people who are tested at the borders in Busia or in the Sudan border coming in. There is nobody in the rural areas. There is no plan of sampled testing in the community. And so that's why even the whole question of contact tracing and so on that was supposed to be managed at the beginning of the pandemic fell through very quickly. And in fact, Uganda progressed to the last stage of transmission within the first 6 months. The COVID virus arrived in Uganda in March. By end of August, beginning of September, we were at stage 4 of transmission, meaning wide-scale community transmission. And once you reach that wide-scale community transmission, it means all those processes of contact tracing and so on are now redundant. Yet, because of God's grace, even up to now, I hear people just thumping, saying they performed excellently because few people have died. But nobody even knows how many people have been killed by COVID, because we are not in the community to manage who has and who doesn't have. There are many people who die of COVID and are buried that we don't know. There are many people who suffer from COVID and get healed that we don't know. So we really do not know anything, literally anything about the pandemic in this country. We are just groping in the dark.
Thank you very much, Kano, for that open and, of course, shedding light on that. I want to bring in Awich Pollar. You know, towards the end, and the end of the president, his address, he almost sounded like he had given up on the pandemic. He said, whether you're vaccinated or not, I'm going to open the economy, meaning that he had given up. He's no longer really
given up on both the pandemic
and the people. But in there, the technocrats and the ministry people seem to come out like they were really prepared and really worked so hard in the management of COVID. Is it true?
Well, if you start by, first of all, I'd like to thank Doctor. He's my senior in all aspects, military and political, and even the NRM secretariat that I am in. I'm recognizing that, that you may not know, you're a young man, that in 1986, when we took over government, I was a baby though, but I remember him, the NPC, and then Jacob Asimwe was, we called him administrative secretary then. We are very instrumental in setting the NRM that we are enjoying now, including the LCs nationwide. So we believe that there could be contradictions, minor or major, whatever it is, but here we are though. So we are still there, but I take great respect for the seniority, as I said, in all aspects. And I'm honored to be here. Now back to the issue you raised. First of all, you are raising a statement that I wasn't privy to. I wish you was quoted the way it is, but let's assume that that is what he said. Although now I can't see the contextual framework, because you can pull out a statement and twist it any way around. But I think that, and also picking from what Doctor said, I've always said that when you take electrical engineer who wires Sheraton Hotel, you may pay him 2 million shillings and you think that is his worth because nothing wrong has happened. But if Sheraton catches fire because of poor wiring, you now start to value the cost that billions of things were lost. In other words, preventive or preemptive actions taken is not valued until if you have seen the other way around. So, the loss of life and the death rate compared to Spain or any other European countries that we are talking about didn't happen in Uganda. Therefore, you can't value what has been done. Of course, at a national level, we know that there was a strategic institutional approach to COVID, with committees and national structures formed and all these preventive measures, breaks that we are saying, the schools, all these ingredients built up to what we achieved. You can't say that, no, it was by God's grace, but really God helps those who help themselves. We achieved it. There might have been inadequacies, but institutional approach was put in place. And we all know, even to date, we still have the members in place. So about giving up, I don't think the head of state really meant that. All he meant was that against all challenges, that is, pros and cons, we have to take a move on a way forward. And the way forward was to open up, as we have done it. But there's no giving up. And if any situation emerges now, I wouldn't be surprised that we revert and take a very critical stage. So a lot has been done institutionally, in very institutional framework. There could have been challenges or gaps in it, or the way it has been handled could not have been the way somebody else like Dr. Besigye sees it, but a lot was done, and we are here. We do notice that we didn't have the institutional preparedness, but amidst that, we survived. So did we survive by grace of God? No. There were institutional framework. A lot of measures was put in place, and things were done. And we are here, we are alive. And there's no giving up.
You see what Paula comes out clear and said that the institutions in place. But sometimes in one of our shows, you say that there's they work on a try and error. In one of our
And
conversations.
it's by error.
And so that's your take.
No, the global approach to COVID pandemic was on trace, test, and treat. So if we gauge the interventions by this government on the three elements, at least at the beginning of the pandemic where there was need for contact tracing, how many people have been tested? How many people have capacity to test? How many people have been treated? How many people have capacity to access this treatment? Remember, we even went through a situation where dead bodies were held captive in hospitals as a country. COVID dead bodies. We have gone through a situation like in Christmas, most communities, there was the outbreak of Omicron with also Delta variant running. Most villages were swept by COVID. But in a district, you would see like 5 people have capacity to test on average in a district. Others, I don't know. So what is the testing capacity in the districts? I think those are clear methods through which we can gauge our management of the pandemic. Many people who have taken COVID treatment, they gauge the cost of medicine vis-a-vis the cost of testing. On average, if you are able to detect early or assume early that you could have COVID, the treatment, the basic treatment is about 100,000. The testing, PCR costs a minimum of 100 to 250,000, depending on the urgency. I think the cheapest PCR test is 100,000. So the approach we have used to manage COVID in terms of medication, because I want to go to other aspects of the pandemic, in terms of medication is to give people, and this is the middle class we are talking about, because the people that can afford 100,000 medication or that prescription of COVID are also limited in this country. The majority cannot. So if I have 100,000 in my pocket and I am middle class, what choice do I have? Do I go to test the cheapest PCR test? When you do the 100,000, you wait for 48 hours to get your results, meaning that the infection can spread in case you are positive in these 2 days that you are waiting for a result. So what choices do we give people with little means? Is to go for self-prescription. If you are lucky, you have a doctor saying, buy this, and those are also limited. But if I go and use my 100,000 for a test, it means then I cannot afford the medication. And then we have also given people an opportunity to choose how to die, especially the extended lockdown, the unnecessary lockdowns. In September, October, November last year, the positivity rate was ranging between 0 to 2% in this country. But we still had lockdown. We still had curfew, meaning that the sectors that have been locked down for 2 years, the government has asked people to choose how to die, either by hunger and starvation, either by COVID, and either by brutality of the soldiers on the roads. So why would you have, and the World Health Organization guidelines has been clear, restrict, put, between 1 and 5% positivity rate. And they based on the assumption that we have ability to test, which we don't have. It is a preserve of a few in this country. So you have like 10, I don't think it's above 20% of the population that have a luxury of testing for COVID in this country. So you are giving people, the World Health Organization guideline was that between 1 and 5% is restrictions. Let people work. Because it was, the management of COVID was about saving lives and livelihood. 5% free. The people remove they lift the restrictions. Restrict above 5%. Have we been following those simple guidelines in this country? The answer is no. And like Doctor said, we opened schools at the time the positivity rate was 20%, having closed when we were at 2%, and the government used an excuse of immunization. The last data released at the beginning of the country was that we had 3% fully immunized population, and we had given out a total of 9.5% doses. So if you rank,
some doses that are expired,
of course, they have failed to have a strategy that reaches out to the people and ensure that the plan, the absence of the plan.
Yeah.
But also beyond the medical, if you go on the livelihood, do we have an economic plan? Recently, I had a conversation where the Minister of State for Finance was, and when we asked the plan for reopening of the economy, he kept referring to Emyoga. So, I really also agree that there has been no comprehensive plan for the management of COVID in this country to save both lives and livelihood of the people.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. Godber, you more, of course, you interact so much with the technocrats, you're a policy person, so I would want to bring you to this discussion. How would you score our performance in terms of course, containment of this pandemic, but also how better can we do, how can we do in a better way?
No, incidentally, the plan to contain COVID was there, but it was very crude. Because for me, reading what the regime has been able to do all through, I read about 3 things. One is that the president knew that we did not have any capacity whatsoever to manage the pandemic. In terms of infrastructure, like the healthcare infrastructure, as Dr. Besigye said, in terms of livelihoods, in terms of economic response, we didn't have the capacity. So really, if you were asked to summarize the response of the regime to the pandemic, was hide away the population from the pandemic. So in other words, you lock everybody at home because you can't, in case of the infections, you can't manage. Yeah, so that's why the first lockdown was so crude that you get even soldiers and security people beating people to keep them in their houses, because the regime had no plan on how to deal with if there was a situation like we saw unfolding in Europe or the US or elsewhere, what would happen. But I also believe that this was the most, I think one of the shabbiest responses that we have. And for me, I use the question of education. I just use education as the litmus test. Because to have a government that is able to lock up a nation's children in their homes for 2 full years only tells you that you have failed to use the science to organize how to open schools safely. Because elsewhere around the world, including countries that had positivity rates of over 40%, they all had their children in schools. Now, the mere fact that for us who did not have that level of infection, that we could fail to work out a plan on how to keep our kids in school safely, for me is the biggest indictment on the failure of this regime to manage a pandemic like COVID. And thirdly, I really want to reflect on the point that Pollar made in giving accolades to KB. You know, he's describing and say that Dr. Besigye is his senior in NRM. Every time I hear the NRM people talk, and they cannot distinguish the NRM that Dr. Besigye worked for as the political commissar, and the fraud that we have today that Pollar works for.
A system and a political party.
A system and a political party, which is not even a political party, because the current NRM is not even a political party. That's a fraud. And that fraud is reflected in the things that this fraud does in our country. So everything is organized around this NRM fraud. And so when you hear what Pollar is saying, and he can't draw the distinction, so he thinks that they are running a system of 1986. It tells you how, as a country, we are in a deep crisis. Because you see, when you have an organization of whatever form that operates with the level of mischief that NRM operates, you cannot have a plan for the country. Because normally the plan is about the organization itself. And even for the pandemic, really that was the crisis that we faced. That because you don't have a functioning government, the institutions of state are so weakened, they have no power to run a system like Dr. Besigye referred to. So in this pandemic, the president, the individual became the system. That you would never, ordinarily, you would have expected the Minister of Education to take charge of education and communicate how we make sure that our schools are operating safely. But when the Minister of Education says, oh, we have to wait for what the president says, then you know that you have a crisis at the country. And so the failure of the education response for me is the ultimate indictment of the failure of our COVID response as a country. Yeah.
Interesting, Godber. And back to Kano. You want to?
Yes, I wanted to respond to Godber. I went into detail about my comment. I don't know whether Godber's issue is the ingredient of seniority.
No, NRM versus NRM.
Wait, let me see whether his issue is to say that NRM is there or it is the same. But by and far, my issue was a sense of politeness to acknowledge a senior person.
I totally agree with you on that.
So that was my gist of the point. So whether he is senior in the NRM then, but I just wanted to be polite to accept seniority. Okay? That was my point. Yeah. But of course, you will realize that up to the referendum, when the people of Uganda went to the referendum to choose whether to go plural or not, it was decided that we go pluralism. And the NRM then constituted itself into a political party, which was registered. And by then I had already joined Secretariat in the legal department. Now, the transformation may appear legal. To us, the spirit remains the same. To that extent, actually.
Isn't that confirming
yes.
a fraud?
You see, the fraud,
my point.
Fraud, if you're saying fraud, it's a judgmental aspect. I don't know in this case who is a judge to judge the fraud in it. But what I'm saying is that constitutionally we underwent, because the grand norm was changed to say you are not. Remember, the other NRM was for everybody. So the change came. Now, if you are saying there's a fraud and you are the alleger and the judge, then that is up to you. But for us, we are saying, much as the legality transformed to a registration of a political organization called NRM, we wish, especially many of us, wish the spirits that is a Besigye had should be the spirit. Now the fraud is your allegation and your judgment. The fraud is your allegation and your judgment.
And
now you are the same alleging and you are the same judging.
You are a prime witness.
In fact, you are a prime witness.
You are the allegor and the judge at the same time. But the core of my comment was acknowledging seniority.
Okay, yeah, no, but that's
How you do it, I don't know.
Kano, again, of course, many of our viewers there have been seeing you as a champion of trying to give the alternative of how to manage the pandemic. And of course, right again, I would want to bring it here for our viewers, especially on Civic Space TV, to ask what would have been the alternatives for the best way of handling this pandemic. But also, we've seen the measures that the government has put across on the recovery plans. What do you say about them?
Well, thank you very much, and I think I may not succeed in avoiding to comment on what this fraud is. You see, you don't need a judge or a prosecutor on the fraud, because you yourself, you've said that NRM, the NRM we were in was for everybody.
Yes.
Now, you in the same breath say that when the people decided that we go to multi-party system, that now that NRM of everybody
Became yours.
transformed itself into a political party.
That is the fraud.
How can
Yes.
everybody transform
into a political party.
so then that means there would be no other political parties now.
Yes.
No, that's why I said the spirit remains.
So,
I think for a viewer,
So
it's
let's-
also
let's-
important to know, sorry, Doctor, that the NRM, a system that should be in abeyance, the party uses the same symbol, the same colors, and the same name of a political system that should be in abeyance as far as our constitution is concerned.
Yeah.
So that is the fraud.
No, this symbol were developed after legality, after registration. It wasn't there in the other one. Sarah, you
Yellow
seem to imply.
bus, yellow bus was
yeah, you
there.
seem to imply that the bus was there.
It was.
No, the bus
No, it
came.
was not.
It was
The
not.
The bus
It
came
was not.
after.
The bus came
Okay.
for the
So
party.
that
But the
reference
and
is
the,
wrong.
and the name,
The color and the name. The name and the
Yes.
color.
The name
Even the
remains.
color came with the symbol. It wasn't there.
Well, the color did
Ask
not come.
Godber.
The
Ask
color,
Godber.
the color did not come with the sim. But let's.
Let's leave it at that.
Yeah.
And the name and the
Let's
color.
stop discussing the fraud. Yeah, we discuss serious
I think
issues.
that needs. Unfortunately, it's not easy to, in brief 1 or 2 minutes, describe what would have been an appropriate management of the pandemic. It's broad. But as I have said, any management would have, first of all, in managing a pandemic, you need to have the maximum unity of a country.
Yeah, that's right.
You need to have an all-inclusive system that manages a pandemic, because you need to mobilize as effectively, urgently, and widely as possible for a response. So the starting point should have been to create that inclusivity in the management of the pandemic. And this would have started by recognizing that this is indeed a world emergency, should have gone to Parliament to seek a declaration of an emergency and creation of an all-inclusive structure that manages the pandemic in a transparent manner that reports as required, in fact, by our constitution, which envisaged such a situation, that once you declare an emergency, then you will be reporting periodically to Parliament, which again is an institution that involves everybody on what is going on in the management of that pandemic. So the institutions that manage a pandemic are important. Regrettably, that's where the starting point of mismanagement began, because instead, Mr. Museveni thought it was an opportunity for himself to now become the manager and to engage his partisan institutions in the management of the pandemic. So he became the chief manager of the pandemic, appointed his prime minister to head the national committee, and in the districts, his RDCs to be the managers of the
medical professionals,
no medical profession.
Yeah.
And because they were running away from the constitutional path that would have required them to declare an emergency, they hid in some obscure health
regulations.
health regulation to manage this kind of an emergency. Now that health, the Health Act, the Public Health Act that they hid in, was also, it's a colonial law which has never been updated. Shame on our constitutional review commission and processes. It is still I think, an act of 1956 that
35?
Some long time colonial law, which still talks about the governor's office. and in the institutions under that law are the colonial institutions. And so under that law, the manager should have been the chief medical officer. Now, the chief medical officer in the current institutions is equitable to maybe the director of medical services. So that would have been the director, the coordinator of the emergency, not the prime minister. But in this case, they created the prime minister, they created the RDCs, who went ahead to do all kinds of things. So institutional management, legal framework under which the pandemic was managed were all faulty. And that's where even the planning, the absence of planning and execution of plans became a problem. So as indeed I pointed out at that time, we could have the plans that one would have expected would have been, for example, in the health sector, to say, now that there is this emergency, how shall we scale up the capacity in the health sector? We have now about the structure of government provides for about 1,000 doctors, I think, in the whole country, in the whole system, which is grossly under manned. Those who are in service, I think about 40%. So the question would have been, what is our plan? How do we scale up very quickly the numbers of doctors, the numbers of nurses, the numbers of all these professionals? How do we scale up the institutional capacity to handle this? You saw there were no places for isolation, no places for this, to create a structure. There was nothing that was put in place. So one would have wanted to see that kind of thing. At the center of a pandemic like this, and I again labored to point out, one of the critical things that must be kept in sharp focus is the immunity of citizens, because that's what is going to be at the forefront, at the front line of meeting with the infection. So what plan is there to maintain or boost quickly the immunity in the population? You saw we didn't even have food. And I think, the response failed from the legal framework under which it was managed, from the institutional framework, from the absence of a plan, and later on in a free fall of execution and the looting. Then it became, and maybe one could easily really presume that these fairly well-known things that could have been done were not done to allow for the massive looting that then took place. because we went ahead and immediately borrowed tons of money without a plan in which, and then went to Parliament to have supplementary budgets that had no plan in view. And that's why you say in managing the pandemic, we took nearly $1 trillion shillings to State House.
Yeah.
In part of the COVID response money for secret work in managing the pandemic.
Hey.
We took, about 4 trillion
Yeah, the
shillings.
separate
4
hospital.
trillion shillings to defense for secret work in the management of a pandemic.
And you have tied the money from the pandemic.
Yes, and in the Ministry of Health, about 100 billion. In fact, they had Ministry of Health itself had, I think, asked for about 80 billion. It was Parliament
about
that
74 billion.
It was Parliament that just increased it, seeing the money floating around. And even the little, that 100 that went to health, was then immediately stolen. That they are putting oxygen in the hospitals, which oxygen later on became a total disaster, and so on and so forth. So really, if we were living in a decently managed country where citizens are alert and active, all the people who are involved with the COVID pandemic should be waiting to go to the gallows. They should have already been condemned to death because they have caused the deaths of so many people. Those lockdowns you are talking about, you just lock down a country without a plan of how you will evacuate emergencies. Mothers who need to go to hospitals to deliver, people who were being managed with routine treatments like cancer patients, diabetic patients who need injections, and so on, all of whom died because they could not have any transportation to the healthcare facilities. And there was no plan to do so. In fact, we tried to create a private self-help plan, which was then failed. So, people should really, and I hope at some stage there will be an inquiry into what happened and how many people really died.
Yeah.
Because although there is a lot of chest thumping, as I have said, about few deaths attributable to COVID, the people who died because of COVID, not infected with COVID, are so many. And one needs actually research to understand the real gravity of what we are talking about.
Thank you very much, Colonel. From Awich, want to add on?
Not so much, but I just like to say that this pandemic came, it was managed. I like to emphasize that we all think, not all of us are the same. The way you would have wanted this table organized is different from the way Sarah would have wanted this table organized. But for inclusiveness, I thought as a country we tried, because that national task force which was formed included as much as possible various stakeholders, private businessmen, whatever, religious leaders, whatever it is, including from abroad, including outsiders. And we also tried, Ugandans in the diaspora, they came on board. Now, we also tried...
Via Zoom, eh?
No, they even raised money. So, a lot of national consensus was built on this. As I said, you may not want it done the same way, but on the question of inclusiveness, a lot of consensus was built. So many people, the task force is still existing up to now. You can scroll through the composition. Now, about the other micro details, including the financial management, I wouldn't want to go into that because I don't have the facts. But on many occasions, the president insinuated the gravity of this matter and the solidness, insinuated by saying we are at war. At war here, he meant the whole country is supposed to be together or is together to combat a situation of national importance. Now, for the sectorial or the lower level organizations at districts, again, because the situation was perceived as a country at war, it needed political leadership. Much as the president was in charge, but the national task force was there, and that all inclusive. Similarly to the district, the symbolic head of an RDC, which by law is a representative of the president, also symbolized that it's like at that level, you needed a political leadership to galvanize all these other forces. And indeed, if you went to the district committees, you'll have
Pollar, do you know that an RDC is a public servant?
The
Yes,
political
it is.
leadership is
Yes.
Do you know it? So
Yes.
what political leadership are you talking about here at the district level?
The political leadership in a delegated capacity of representation of the head of state. The head of state is himself political. Okay? The head of state of it, I started by saying it's a representative of the president.
So you're saying that a public
Okay?
servant can be appointed to lead, to be a politician?
I'm saying so. You can contest it in courts of law, but I'm saying so.
Okay.
Now, what I'm saying here, at the lower level, if you see the composition of that body at that level, it included the director of medical services that the doctor referred to, it included the police, whatever security sectors, it included even ordinary people. So all at times...
Who would take directives from the non-medical people?
Not the directive
Because
as
that's
it wasn't. You see, where consensus is built is you have a chair. It is, you could call it collective, the democratic centralism. But here is a body that is supposed to develop consensus and implement. It's not that this body, these members come to hear an instruction from the RDC or take an order. If anything, by the way, you should know that when you are given a chair, you have actually denied yourself a chance to talk. If you're a good chair. Or if you're a speaker of parliament, you have denied your chance to speak. Why? Because your role is to build consensus. Your role is not as a chairman or a speaker to dictate on others. So even the role of a good RDC who knows how to chair things, his role is not to give instruction. His role is consensus building, to panel beat the meeting so that the consensus is raised and you get a way of implementation. A chairman or a speaker loses his right to speak. Ask Olanya, your work is to see who is speaking, how have we agreed. So you don't tell me, I can't agree that you will say an RDC in a constituted body is there to give orders. No. So no doctor. If anything, the medical person there actually wields a bigger say because many people tend to listen from an expert opinion. The doctor, the director of medical services, is in that body to give expert opinion, and the others adopt. Maybe the others will come in terms of logistics, security, and the rest, but the core input in that committee, the expert opinion, is given by director of medical services. And this is what we thought things would do at national and lower level. If there was any broader consensus, now this brings me to the issue of the law. The Constitution, as we all know, cannot be implemented per se. Constitution is a grown norm. Ordinarily, a constitution is supposed to be operationalized by an act of parliament. But be as it is, we got laws from colonial powers. There was what is called transition. How these laws were co-opted at independence. Many of them are there, including Penal Code Act. Many of them are there. So, and some laws you don't seem to see it until you are challenged. For example, many of us don't even know there's a law regarding crocodile. Are you aware there's Crocodile and Fish Act? Until you are challenged with that. So even the same scenario, we wouldn't have, while we put in the grand norm, the constitution, the emergency, none of us was faced with a challenge that could have, that is why we ended up using the law applicable, the law that was there in place. You won't go to amend the Fish and Crocodile Act until tomorrow you are maybe challenged with the matters to do with crocodile.
Okay.
So that was the law in place.
Thank you. Sarah, now we're getting into, we've been first with the pandemic, and now it's the process of recovery. We're in the period of recovery. The measures put up by the judge. What's your take on the recovery, economic recovery?
Well, in my view, I think the government has no plan for economic recovery. We have programs that are a repeat or a recycling of what we have done before. I don't know what is proposed differently, because from the time NRM came to power, we had the programs like Entandikwa, Bonabagagawari. Later they called it what? Microfinance, where they appointed Dr. Kazubwe and then the ministers for microfinance with the general salary, then Operation Wealth Creation, then Myoga, where the first touch by Parliament has shown grand theft by the people supposed to disburse Myoga funds, but which is also a partisan tool right at the time of campaigns, and with some offices of Myoga being hosted in NRM party offices, yet this is taxpayers' money, including Makinda and other areas, as Parliament discovered. And then we are now calling it, still we have Myoga and parish model, but the same thing that has failed for 35 years. The Private Sector Foundation has done a survey on the impact of COVID. They published just last month in December in preparation for reopening of the economy. In the Private Sector Foundation survey, they have established that 75% of businesses have been lost due to COVID measures and effect. They have lost key resource persons, including their executive director who lost his life due to COVID. And now they have a new executive director. And we all know that entrepreneurship is a skill to an individual. And in most cases where we have lost some of these big business people, the latest being the entrepreneur of, say, Sembure factories, industries. So we've lost a lot of entrepreneurs that we have now, and most of their businesses will wither out because of still the economic conditions in the country. There are high taxes, that they've noted the situation of high taxes that they want waived in the new budget framework paper, and I don't know whether Parliament will rise up to the occasion. They have also noted limited or problematic access to credit, and then the local purchasing power. The citizenry out of COVID do not have money to purchase the goods and services by private sector to enable recycling and revival of the economy, among others. So the question should be, now that there is a scientific finding on impact of our economy and proposals on what can work and what can't work, the question would be, what is government doing? When you talk to government about the recovery plan, I think going by what the president announced is opening of night economy, which is very important and it employs many people. He talked about lifting of curfew, with curfew on borders, as if borders, where, because if you go by the philosophy of the soft parts, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and then hands don't touch your soft parts. If you look at border transport, there is no connection of the two people's soft parts. One is facing there, the other one is in the back. So meaning that there would be ordinarily limited transmission on border transport.
They are from the mouth.
Yes, as compared to taxis where the soft parts are near each other. But the measures announced retained that closure on borders, and it is now seeming like a personal grudge on the sector because there is no.
Would the transmission only happen after a few hours?
That's also the other question. And also the approach. The approach is as if COVID is transferred at night. Because even the closure on bars, what owners did was to design a new signpost, put the restaurant and the bar, because restaurants were open. So if restaurants cannot transmit COVID, how can bars transmit COVID? And if I change and put a restaurant, who says in a restaurant you cannot consume alcohol? And bars have been open. Based on that technicality, which really seemed to be a naive issue on the part of the so-called.
But people have been continuing
yes.
business.
And then also we have also had the challenge of partial or selective opening.
Yeah.
The people who are connected to the patronage, including bars, there is really an annoying bar on Kororo, where former Uganda Law Society offices, where it is open 24 hours. They even park in the road and block the road, and there is always a policeman telling you this road is closed at midnight, because there is a show I participate on that ends late in the night. You find the police officer stopping you and telling you the road is closed unless you're going to the bar.
Godber, what's your take on the measures or economic measures of recovery?
No, I think I still believe with Dr. Besigye that ours, everything has been on the mercy of God, and for many African countries actually, we live by God's grace. Yeah, so the weather has been very, very kind to us. We don't have extreme weather events, especially in terms of coldness and heat waves. Many countries, particularly Uganda, people produce their food. So it's many people in urban areas who suffer when there are food shortages. In the village, in most rural areas, you are able to get along, even if you are not in the money economy, because you're not starved, because you always have something to eat. So you see, from the first address by the president, I think that was March 2019, there were we made consistent demands of like, no, we need to have a clear economic response plan of how do we keep the economy moving, how do we secure livelihoods, how do we ensure recovery. That debate continued until a time actually when there was a budget presented in Parliament, and I think that's the 2019-2020 budget. And the president even agreed with the minister, Kasaija, in Parliament, and as the president was giving a speech, he said, I don't agree with this one. But this is in Parliament. And then that's the time when they assigned this group called Operation Wealth Creation and said they have to go and review the budget. That's the extent of capture that we have been subjected to, that a budget approved by Parliament, a constitutional body, is given to a shadow group, an administrative arrangement called Operation Wealth Creation, and say you change the budget. And that's why even in this country you can't have a plan, because the authority to ensure consistency in planning is not necessarily vested in institutions, but is vested in these patronage networks around the president. And therefore you can't say we've had a coherent plan. At the beginning of, at the inception of COVID, actually at Greece we have a group called the Transitional Leaders, Uganda Transition Scenarios Leadership Group. We did a series of briefs in terms of reflecting on how to respond to COVID and what the implications were. And we published those briefs. We wrote briefs on how to deal with education, for example, how to deal with the economy, how to deal with elections. Sarah here put out a very good brief on how do you organize the elections in a pandemic. And but you see, our institutions are so broken that they have no capacity to absorb independent knowledge and ideas. That's normally what happens in dictatorships. When regimes become dictatorial and you have personalized centers of power, their capacity to absorb knowledge from different circles, from different sources, diminish accordingly. And that's what you saw with the COVID-19 pandemic. The level of uncoordination or lack of coordination of institutions, the failure to make coherent decisions, the failure to to create scenarios and build response options, which again right now is reflected in the current fuel crisis. That you have Minister of Health announcing public health measures that create both national, economic, and national security threats. Because if you fail to have, if you disrupt the energy supply chain in any country, you are undermining the national economy and national security. That as a country we are not even able to use the East African Community mechanism, something we've been singing about, to be able to make decisions that allow the supply chain of energy and fuel in particular fuel that is to proceed without unnecessary interruption. So all these elements show you that as a country we struggle to get along. Now, in most cases, when we question some of these responses, people like Pollar will actually say we are not appreciative of what has been accomplished. And I normally hasten to add that for many of us who question our incapacities and inefficiencies in the system, we are not necessarily not appreciating. We are only saying that this is a country that can do better because we are a wealthy country with very hardworking people. We only lack the political leadership almost at all levels. And that lack of political leadership is always reflected in the dysfunction of the public service institutions that are supposed to plan and ensure systematic execution of these plans. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
It's just a question for Godber. You hinted on the question of Africa surviving by grace of God, especially in reference to this pandemic.
Yeah.
Now, do you realize that if we had not survived by that grace of God, you were going to say the failure was because of man, the leaders? In other words, when there's success, it is God. When there's failure, it is the leaders. Do you realize that if we had had the death, the level of Spain, you were going to say it is because of man's failure? But now that there's death not to that extent, that appears that to have been managed, you are saying it is God. So how do you selectively say when there's God intervention and human intervention?
I think at this level is on the level of strategies.
If I may ask
I can
which
I
before
can-
Godber comes in, which we have had the Omicron, what the Minister of Health declared as a third wave at 22% positivity rate for the few that we are able to test. If you've held conversations with friends, almost every household in this country has had Omicron over Christmas and this month of January.
Yeah.
What interventions has government done if you are saying it's not the grace of God?
So, but still I want my question answered by God. That success is attributed to God,
Because of
but
the
failures would be attributed to man.
No, let me explain to my brother Pollar. You see, God gives us certain gifts. I always tell colleagues that the difference between human beings and other animals is that God gave us capabilities to be able to harness nature and use it to our advantage. That's the difference. Otherwise, we are all animals. Yeah? So God can give you water the way he gave Uganda water. civilized and organized societies will harness the water and utilize it and do booming agriculture. So in other words, in Egypt, where we import our tomatoes and oranges from, God only gave them the River Nile. Because they are organized, because they have leadership, they produce agricultural products and export them to Uganda, to the source of the Nile.
There is abundance.
Yeah, to the source of the Nile. God gave us good climate. Yeah.
You see, what I'm saying is, Godber.
Let me complete, Paula. God gave us good climate. We can harness that climate, and we could be the star in agricultural production in this country. You and I know that across this country, everybody lives subsistence. For how many years have we existed as a country? Let's just count the 60 years of independence. Everybody living from hand to mouth. Museveni calls it Chidachunka. But the man has ruled this country for half of the years of independence. In other words, we are far more than half of the years we have been independent. And then he comes to TV and goes to Parliament and talks Chidachunka. Now, as a people, if you have leadership, you will progress, you will succeed, you will prosper. When you don't have leadership, you will fail. You survive on the mercy of God. So in other words, God is able to feed us because we grow this thing here and there and we eat.
But you see, the question itself is wrong, and I think his wrong question shouldn't be allowed to go. He's creating an impression that we are saying we have succeeded by the grace of God. No,
we haven't.
We have survived by the grace of God, not because we have succeeded. We actually failed miserably, but didn't die.
Yes.
Because the failure is in the failure to stop transmission. So we didn't stop the transmission. I told you, and this is factual, and I can provide you with the facts of the World Health Organization and of the Ministry of Health here. We reached the last stage of transmission by August, beginning of September 2020. In other words, we had reached the final stage of failure to contain the transmission. The only grace of God is that although the transmission was going, we didn't die. And the reason we didn't die is also not very mysterious. First of all, it's because we are a young population. People above 60% are only about 3% of the population. People above 60 years are about 3% of the population. Those are the most vulnerable to this condition. In Europe, those above 60% are more than 20% of the population. So most of our youngsters got infected. Many didn't even know that they were infected. They kicked out the infection and continued moving around. That is the grace of God we are talking about. Not that the virus itself was not rampant. It was. Of course, there is also the grace of God that in Africa, we don't live in sterile systems. From childhood, we are eating insects, eating soil, eating this.
Stones.
So we have a much greater capacity to resist infections. You know, like we live with malaria. Anybody who comes from abroad, malaria kills them almost immediately. For us, we can keep on moving around with our malaria. So that is the grace of God, not because we succeeded, and you are saying we are describing our success as the grace of God. No, the grace of God is not dying survived in spite of the failure.
Doctor, right there. We're going to have a break. Doctor.
I needed a reply to that.
Doctor, as we conclude, getting to the break, Doctor, I want to finalize with this question. And of course, we're discussing the recovery. In what ways would possibly President Kiiza Besigye's reopening of the economy be different from the current approach?
You see, even
And the
before you
outlook
talk
itself.
about reopening, the plan to close is part of the plan to survive the closure. So we should have had a plan to close that would have created a much less adverse impact on our people. You know, the loss of livelihoods should have been planned for. For example, many people, and I interact with many who were, say, farming chicken,
Yes.
and who lost
All their business.
all their investment because of the sharp closure without any plan of how they will get inputs
Yeah.
and what they will do with outputs. That could have been mitigated right at the beginning if we had a closure plan. And so, you know, this is, every stage has been compounding the other. And I told you that that's why we needed a plan, a comprehensive plan, a strategic plan from the beginning of the pandemic to the end, including, so the plan to close, the plan to reopen. You saw how the shops, after saying they reopen, that's when now they were going to see whether shops now meet soaps. and closing, saying, you know, this mall won't open because this one hasn't met the soap. What was the time of the closure used for? If it was not used
What are the soaps?
to make sure that the reopening will happen according to the standards that you have set. So this, as I say, every stage compounds the failure of the previous step. Now, so we should have had a budget right from the word go of the support that we are going to put in the recovery. It could be adjusted, of course, depending on the emerging realities, but we should have had a plan. What support plan is there for small enterprises? And small enterprises we are talking about here, we are not talking about even those chicken farmers. We are talking about a chapati man who ate all his flour during the lockdown because he had nothing else to eat. How does this chapati man
Get back.
get back
To work.
to have his chapati, just the flour and the oil and maybe the charcoal, you know, just that micro. So we should have had a plan to deal with this, to deal with the smaller, with the bigger enterprise, to deal with the big ones. There is no such a plan. So if you don't plan, as the saying goes, you plan to fail. And that's regrettably where we are. So we failed in the health sector because we didn't have a plan of stepping up manpower, protecting that manpower in the face of the pandemic. Up to now, there are no personal protection equipment in the public health institutions. So even now, even during this Omicron, I read somewhere a doctor has also been killed by COVID in 2 years after. I mean, what kind of criminality can that be? That you know, you up to now cannot protect your frontline workers and provide for them. So in every, whether it's the economy, whether it's the health sector, whether it's the education, you know, education now, you see the chaos that is in education, that kids have to jump classes and there is no knowledge of how that jumping of classes, that somebody who finished primary 7 is now in senior 2. And there is no plan of how that every school will now see how to fidget and cope up with this. And yet we had 2 years of that extended period. Yet they have opened, and we are fidgeting on how to fix this. So yes, the economy, fortunately, you know, they have played with all these things. They play with the social sector. People die, people suffer, but the economy has no fixes, and it's going to fix them. If you don't fix the economy, it fixes you. I can tell you that they have played around with all kinds of things. The disaster in the economy will fix this NRM disaster that has caused it. Because, you see, what sustains them, what sustains the patronage, the money they distribute to all of the full figures and so on, is money that is earned from production. Once you have hit production as it has been hit comprehensively, you will not have the resources. The budget for this year, which they have already added on a supplementary, again, our planning system, a supplementary of about 4 trillion. So now it's coming close to 50 trillion, the supplementary budget, getting a supplementary after 3 months. The tax collection, the domestic revenue, they will be lucky if they collect 20 trillion.
Yeah.
So where will the rest come from? They are going to borrow it from you. That means that even these people who have been so badly hit cannot borrow within the market, because all the money is going to be taken by the government to pay my friend his salary.
Yes.
Because they cannot pay, they have to borrow to pay salaries of all this burgeoning, public system that they have created. So the crisis that we are seeing, whether in the fuel, this is still just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
There is a huge crisis that cannot be folded back. And it is the crisis that the country must now get to terms with on how to resolve this. The healthcare crisis, the education crisis, the livelihood crisis, the economic crisis, and at the center of that, we are spending money in Congo, fighting war and doing all kinds of things. So all this is going to be a test for every Ugandan.
Yeah, interesting, Kano. Thank you very much for that. And of course, let's get to have our short break. And while they are kindly be part of this conversation, we are on chat show UG. The hashtag is running on Twitter. Kindly send in through your comments, be part of the conversation that is happening. And of course, on our YouTube channel, Civic Space TV, the conversation is happening. Be part of this conversation. Let's break off and return shortly. Thank you.
Violence, anger and hatred, misery, loss and pain. No, this shouldn't be the situation after elections. Fellow youth and Ugandans, now that elections are over, it is time to embrace our differences in opinion, political affiliations, and other issues that tend to divide us. We need to refocus on all the things that are beneficial to us, our families and friends. It's our duty to restore peace in our communities, and even as we participate in democratic processes, it's important that we do it with dignity. Say no to post-election violence. This message is brought to you by Center for Constitutional Governance in partnership with Action Aid Uganda.
Welcome back from that short break, and of course, follow this conversation on our YouTube channel, Civic Space TV. Subscribe, just hit that subscription and be part of the conversations, the updates that keep coming throughout the week. Very many programmings are happening on the Civic Space TV, but also on our Twitter handles, and of course the hashtag ChatShowUG and Civic Space TV handles, of course, the hashtags that are in there. Comment, be part of the conversations that are happening. And today, of course, like any other day, we always have different guests, but we've been blessed to have Dr. Col Kiiza Besigye, who is here with us today, and of course with Sarah and Awich Pollar. The debate is energized, and we had a very, very interesting first part of the conversation, and we need to get into the second part that possibly will give us more insights on what is happening around the country. I want to bring Sarah into the debate. The last part of the conversation, you were not so much active. I don't want to bias you, so, so I want to give you the chance. Now we're discussing, of course, still on the recovery. How can we refocus the economy to be productive, and of course make it work for all Ugandans?
You know, in other countries, they are talking of a Marshall Plan for recovery. America calls their plan the Build Back Better, which includes even child tax cuts and allowances. The basic, away from the economic terms, the basic issue would be how to inject money into the economy, into the hands of the people, to increase household incomes, thereby increasing the purchasing power of the people, to build the cycle of the economy. Like production has 3 tiers of production, marketing, and then delivery to the market. Consumption is about money. Can you afford? In Europe, they pay people to buy things, just to inject money into the economy. So in simple economics, we need a way of injecting money into the economy. Give access to credit for the people to revive their businesses and livelihoods. Give tax waivers for the citizens to have money injected into the economy to be able to purchase goods and services at household level. Give waivers on taxes. And under the 2-year school lockdown, we had a crisis of school children at home, 15 million. There were those that could afford were running online. But the regime imposed 12% internet tax in an economic crisis where schools are closed and you are encouraging online learning, and then you are imposing a tax on children's heads as they struggle to keep running. Does that sound like a serious country? I do not think so. But away from that, we must look at what taxes. The finance technocrats are saying they are looking at ways of expanding a tax base. That means increasing taxes on a suffering citizenry, on a suffering private sector, on a thriving economy. Just last year in the State of the Economy report by Bank of Uganda, we had a big shortfall in revenue collection of 2 trillion, which is, 2 trillion shillings, shortfall on revenue. We had a contraction of the economy from 6.4% to 3.2. Our economic recovery rate was either 3.2 or 3.3 during last year. So you have economic contraction, you have revenue shortfall, but you are planning to impose more taxes. Taxes on who or what? You have sectors that have been under lockdown for 2 years, like the entertainment industry. But you want to impose new taxes on them, even without injecting money to make sure because many of these businesses have closed. And you don't even have data of how many Ugandans have lost jobs. Just in the last year, if you look at IMF data, because we rarely have our own accurate data on these things. Using IMF data, 10% of the people employed in the formal sector lost jobs and moved into agricultural sector. So, but some did not transit. So you had 10% loss at the economic front and 8.8% going into agricultural sector. So where did the 1.2 go? Can anybody account for them? You know that's what serious nations are supposed to be doing. You know that these people, I have these people employed here. For example, do we know the number of people employed in border sector? It is the second biggest employer next to agriculture. Do we know the number of people employed in the border sector? Do we know how many people have lost their borders in these draconian curfew measures? And do we know how many people have lost jobs just in that single sector? And what are we doing about it? How many motorcycles do we have held in police countrywide? And what are we doing about that? As we say, the economy is open. What economy are we opening? What simple measures are we putting in place? I don't see anything serious happening.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And Awich, we're trying to recover from the 2 years lockdown, and of course trying to recover and trying to position our economy. Then we are seeing one of the very unpopular measures at the borders, closing of part of the fuel that really is part of the cost of production, the means of production. Fuel is quite important in our economy. In a point where we are trying to recover, then you have that is happening without consultation. Yes.
Maybe we forgot an issue. We are forgetting an issue of market vendors and their plight in Kampala. But we have the right person to speak to it.
Interesting.
Together with the
then you also,
borders.
yes. At the recovery, then you have now the vendors, like Sarah has noted, you're chasing them out of town. You know, where are we? Are you considering the people in this plan?
But for the sake of our viewers, Sarah has put forward measures that see things does not augur well, or that shows that we are not pointing to a direction of recovery after the pandemic. I also would want, before I come to the issue of the border, I would want to give an alternative view as to how measures that will make the economy recover. We should remember right from the beginning that we have the routine national budget, which will operate. And this national budget had taken in place many intervention aspects to let the economy move forward in an ideal situation, okay? But also not very ideal in a sense that I think the budget which came in July had already taken note of the aspects of the pandemic. So first on the table is the annual national budget is going to be operationalized, which has been scrutinized by Parliament, which has been thought through by the experts, and that is it. Two is that there are intervention measures which has been put in place. Under Ministry of Microfinance, I think there's a fund which is supposed to be like a relief fund to help businesses. And of course, you have to apply on show cause. And I think they are beneficiaries to that effect. There's also a fund which was established under the Uganda Development Bank, which continues to operate, which would be an intervention window for the recovery of the economy. We all operate here basing on the understanding of the principle that we operate in a private economy. Private economy means individual investors. I think there's due recognition that these private investors, like Dr. gave the example of a chapati maker, their intervention measures of strengthening or protecting them. So I may not go into the details of the micro of these measures, but measures are in place, and which is envisaged both under the annual budget and also envisages under the institution set up for interventions for recovery plan. It will be hard though, hard in a sense that resources may not be all that is enough. The resource envelopes may not be all that is enough for would be distressed persons, because many people are distressed. Being a private economy, many people are distressed. So the resource envelope may not be enough, but there are measures in place. So we wait to see at the end of the year, and especially after the implementation of the annual budget, which in it are embedded all these interventions, to see how we come out of it. Of course, as we had earlier on had, there's a pessimistic view that we are looming for a serious problem, economic problem, if I may say, for want of better words. But I think we shall endure, especially with these interventions put in place. So now that brings me to the border thing. The border thing, of course, has a lot of impact. The fuel is a basic, one of the biggest ingredients in the economy. I think it was a Ministry of Health matter. Their implementation, whether they conceived this in good faith, it failed to work. Like I have always said, even in laws, you think you have made a beautiful law, but when you put it to implementation, you see cracks, and that leads to amendment of laws. Similar in matters of policy. If you think you have conceived a good policy, you put it into practice, sooner or later you see cracks, and therefore you have to revisit that policy. I'm sure Ministry of Health has revisited it, and soon things will normalize. But of course, normalization will go with a lot of effect already. Loss of revenue, loss of this, and impact on livelihood. So that effect is there.
Because initially, you say that there is of course, there always the committees that were set up from the time of the task forces. Of course, if there is a health task force that was set up, and of course this involves also other policymakers, shouldn't they have consulted in there?
How long does it take them?
Yes.
To handle the issue of the border?
To know that what if we took this measure, how would it have?
That's what I
which
say.
impact would it
That's
have
what I'm saying.
on the economy?
That's
So that
what
also the economy
That's what I'm saying,
out.
that as policy, like the law, for those who make it, remember to generate a consensus on a matter on the table. There are many factors in place. Either the human resource, the intellect capacity around the table, or some interest embedded therein. But all in this crystallizes into a decision made and the effect. So whether the committee is there is that what we are seeing now, that their decision that they took as a matter of policy did not work, and therefore called for abolition or doing it the other way around. But we are saying, while that is done, we have already felt the effect. But it is done, and they did their work. It proved not working. It proved that it has negative effect. Just like I said, you pass a law, you think you have done a good job, but it's not.
Yes,
so
that
is what has happened. But now that it is cured, with the other intervention in place, we hope for a good recovery.
Interesting. Doctor, he's talking about the budget. And of course, we know that Uganda's public debt has surpassed the recommended 50% ratio of GDP. The new budget framework, of course, paper is before Parliament, and the proposals by the ministry seem to focus.
Yeah, it was thrown out yesterday.
It was thrown out yesterday.
Because of inconsistencies.
Interesting. But of course, it was more of focusing on the luxury of the leader instead of really working on the welfare of the people. What's your take on this?
Well, you see, we have really what one can describe as a predatory regime, a regime that is feeding on the people of Uganda, literally eating them. And, this, I think, is reflected in the total marginalization and neglect of how people survive. Even when they talk, when we look at security, which is taking a lot of money, it is not security of people, it is security of the regime. In fact, people become more and more insecure every day in an attempt to secure the regime. I think the economic challenges of the country are founded in that philosophy of whose good the economy is serving. And even when you talk about debt, that debt is actually, these figures that are churned out by government, including Bank of Uganda and so on, I don't believe. Because I don't think they even know to what extent the public debt is in Uganda. All these local governments are literally bankrupt and they live on credit. That credit, I believe, is not part of what is computed as public debt, but it's part of certainly the domestic areas of the country. So to get out of the crisis in which the country finds itself now, as I think Sarah hinted, is going to need some kind of a Marshall Plan of how, because we are talking about vanquished production. So we must talk about how do we stimulate production. And you can see that's the focus of every country after the pandemic, economic stimulus. How are we stimulating production? And the points she was raising are very, very valid. You know, you cannot have a high tax regime if you intend to stimulate production. In fact, it's even a self-defeating approach, even in the selfish interest of the regime to collect more tax. Because once the tax regime is very high, first of all, you'll have greater tax avoidance. People will avoid paying the tax, smuggle, do all kinds of things to avoid the tax, pay bribes to the tax collectors and so on. They will avoid the tax when the tax regime is very high. But second, it's a disincentive. And you are taking what would be used in production into this tax, the tax sector. So the policies that stimulate production, that stimulate the economy, must be looked at. And credit is definitely one key area. I told you a little earlier that the policies we are now pursuing of increasing public debt is directly impacting on the available credit for the rest of the people. If we have a budget, you are making a budget of nearly 50 trillion, when you intend to collect 20, it means that you are going to crowd out everybody from credit in the country to go and pay and use it in consumables, salaries, recurrent expenditure. So this is why I say that there are no quick fixes. This regime certainly cannot fix this economy. And this is why it's critical that the country really takes a pause and look at how to save ourselves. Don't think that this fuel, you see, when even before this border skirmishes came up, the fuel price in Uganda was already too high. Even before the border things, fuel was at about 4,700 in the country. That is extremely high, considering that it impacts all sectors of production. Now, so other countries have gone in to mitigate on the fuel rises. First of all, here, the tax on fuel is very high. But secondly, the unavailability of reserve within the country, and it's not just fuel reserve. This is why I say that, you know, we have a predatory regime. We don't have a reserve of anything, not even reserve in the Bank of Uganda. It was eaten a long time ago. We live hand to mouth. And COVID really exposed all this, that even to buy the first sack of posho to save people they had locked down, they had to go and borrow. They could not first take money from the reserve, even as they are arranging borrowing. So they had to borrow commercially, 600 million euro. That was the first borrowing of COVID, to provide the food relief, to start providing the food relief. So we don't have a reserve in the Bank of Uganda. We don't have a reserve of fuel anywhere in the country. We are a landlocked country, and therefore any shock that comes in will push all these things to go haywire. These are not matters that we can, hope to resolve by just tinkering on the edges. It's not that you do this reform, maybe do this. We must have a fundamental reset of the whole system of our country. Economic, social, political, we must have a fundamental reset. The crisis is so deep that it cannot be, just sorted out by suggesting minor reforms here and there.
Yeah, talking about now the alternative governance that we might be, what we might envisage or what we might want. Like, for example, you're leading the red card movement. How would you rate the performance of the opposition in Uganda today?
First of all, I have always contested the terminology of opposition. Opposition presupposes that you have a government side and you have those who are in the political opposition of the government. Now, that to my mind does not fit what we have here. First of all, as is common knowledge, since independence, Ugandans have never of their will raised a government into power. They have never. Every government that has been in power since independence was not raised to take power by the people. So people have no control, have no say in who takes government or who leaves government. Whoever has left government did not leave because people said so. Whoever has taken the government did not take government because people said so. So people are completely marginalized in as far as the power dynamics are concerned. The regime that is in power today, of which, as Pollar here said, I was at the beginning a member of, took power by force. And we said that on this 26th day of January 1986, the National Resistance Army has taken the power of state of Uganda and vested it in the National Resistance Movement. So we captured power by force. It is that which he was
talking about. We shall say
laboring to say
they will celebrate it next
that,
week.
that it is still continuing. That it is still continuing.
The capture.
Now,
The
therefore,
they will celebrate the capture.
therefore,
next
to
week.
talk about opposition, which would mean that the people have elected a government, and those who have not constituted the government who were elected have now formed an opposition to it, is misnomerous. It is misleading. What we have in Uganda, therefore, are people who capture power by force and those who are captured. Those are the two sides, the captors and the captured. So you can ask, what are the views of those who are
captured,
captives? Who are captured? They are not an opposition. That they have a say, which say, that you see a leader of a party goes to talk on a radio, not even to hold a public rally, to talk on a radio, and the military comes and says, you will not talk from here, get out. And you say you are opposition. Which opposition? You are a captive. So the captives, who are the population? It's the population that has no say, as I have said. Their money is divided amongst the captors the way the captors want. They use it, and in total contempt of what people are saying. You say, what will you say? What will you
What
do?
can you do?
What can you do? Even the law that governs the country, you can see what they want is what becomes the law. So in that kind of a situation, yes, the captors and who in every respect, facing up to the vagaries of that captivity, must critically think of how to break out of captivity. This situation will not change, will not be, of course, the captors may change. Even today, some other military man may overthrow the current regime. The nature of the regime does not change. So regimes have been changing, but people have remained in captivity. And that's what we must, all of us, think collectively together to get out of, to get into a situation where we have equal voices as envisaged by the Constitution, that every person has an equal voice in this country, and that therefore we can influence how we share into the opportunities of the country, how we share into the resources, and so on and so forth. So your question of what you call the opposition, I think is one that really needs very urgent attention by all those who are on the receiving side of the captors. Because if we really don't think quickly, organize quickly, and break out of captivity, we shall be decimated, as indeed is happening, which is what we were discussing that happened during the COVID pandemic. People dying needlessly in their homes because they had no food, because they had no evacuation to hospitals and so on. So this is an urgent thing. The education. Education is the most important equalizer and liberator in any polity. Education is going further and further away from the captives. In other words, the knowledge gap, we are talking about a huge knowledge gap between Africa and the developed countries. But even within our own underdeveloped countries like Uganda, the knowledge gap between those who are privileged and ordinary people is going to be catastrophic if we don't really act with haste to ensure that we can have some improved knowledge delivery to the population. Because as she was saying, during the last 2 years, when everybody else was locked out of education, some people were getting education. Even during ordinary times, you have schools which don't really build any knowledge to talk of.
And those ones collapsing on learners.
And those, those are the ones. Those are the ones which are collapsing on learners, which even when they are not collapsing, there is really nothing going on there. And that's why 75% of children that go into primary one give up before P7 and say there is nothing to gain here and leave school. So there are urgent matters that require all of us, not political, because when we talk about opposition, people look at political parties, FDC, DP, NUP, I don't know what. This is why I say this is misleading. It is everybody, whether you are in the media, whether you are in civil society, whether you are, all of us captives must think very fast how we get out of this captivity, must organize to ensure that we get out of this captivity as quickly as possible.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah. Talking
And that's what you are saying, the red card front.
yes.
That is really the whole idea of the red card front. The red card front is a clarion call, is a rallying call for all Ugandans to appreciate the very deep crisis in which we are, and we have tried to crystallize that crisis in a small pamphlet, booklet, to say this is the extent of the crisis. This is what we need to deal with as urgently as possible.
How do you rate his performance so far?
Well, it's still in the formative stage. I think it would be a bit too early to start assessing performance, but the fact that it is now there, you are now talking about it, and I think the country is seized with the idea that there are people who are organizing to confront this crisis. We have presented the crisis to the country. We are taking it around the country for people to appreciate what the crisis is. We are providing an avenue in which we can deal with this crisis. Say this is what we need to do to deal with this crisis. And that is what we call the agenda for transition. We believe that the crisis to end, we must end what caused the crisis. Military capture of the state must end, and we must have a transition to a dispensation where we all have equal voices.
Interesting, doctor, right there. Sarah, a captive. Right there.
It's free.
As a captive.
It's free lady.
Use doctor as well as a captive. Those who have come out in this captivity
free lady.
to want to offer alternative leadership, how would you rate them?
You know, I agree with the principle that you cannot have opposition in the absence of ruling party. Just drawing lessons from the last campaigns, or the last 3, you can even go up to 2001. Who has been in charge? First of all, NRM cannot exist without state institutions. Even when they are talking of structures, then you find they incorporate LC1s, so they incorporate state institutions into their own party in courts. Institutions, including, unfortunately, the military. The UPDF, which is intended, and we have 2 former colleagues of UPDF. The UPDF, you are NRA, you didn't join, you retired before UPDF, before the 1995 constitution. When did you retire?
Yeah, around there. But when you're talking of the 2 colleagues, talk of NRM.
Okay, but
the constitutionalism later.
Okay, let me say the army. Today, the UPDF is a practical military wing of NRM. Look at the way they went about to the last campaigns, starting with the so-called campaign on berets. People are wearing military hardware. They even gazetted an instrument. But what did we say a few weeks ago? Andrew Mwenda, who is a protege of the regime, in full military wear, in helicopter, commanding and parting commanders and exposing them, violating all the principles of warfare. So if this army was serious about, and they were going about people not wearing military hardware, but something resembling, a style resembling the style of the military, arrested people, some of them have never been seen again, in the name of fighting people power. So why are you today donating a helicopter, military uniform, somebody to command you are pilots, pilots at a war front? And why did you kill the people for wearing a style resembling a hat of UPDF and the police? So that really paints the picture of state capture. I've been studying the case of President Zuma, the outgoing president of South Africa, on state capture. If we instituted such proceedings in Uganda, ours would be worse than a state capture case of Zuma. Because when you look at the grounds what Zuma is being charged with, giving businesses to your friends, putting your family in charge. How is that arranged to have captured the state? Ours would be 100 times more than what Zuma is faced with, including state institutions like the military. Zuma did not abuse the defense forces of South Africa, but we had even the command of the army engaged directly in campaigns with the command of the mechanized military brigade in Masaka, issuing cantankerous statements, political statements. He has never been reprimanded. Brigadier Sandi, threatening people, campaigning openly, issuing threats to opposition as a serving military officer and the command of the most strategic brigade, mechanized brigade of Masaka. Has he ever been reprimanded if we do not have dire consequences of state capture in this country? And how can you have opposition in such a situation? You just have the people versus the military.
Interesting. Awich Pollar, we are discussing captivity in Uganda.
State capture.
State capture.
I really don't agree with that. I really want to say that many people, including Dr. Besigye, put in a lot of effort to capture the state power in 86, which was done. But the basic capture was to give power to the people, which he achieved, or which was achieved. So, first I want to comment on the issue of security. Dr. Besigye said that the security now is purposely state security vis-a-vis the people. I have a contrary view, because if you look at the populace, the country all over, their yardstick of security is I have not been killed, especially unlawfully. At night, I can drink my warrant, walk home, and sleep.
Is that the yardstick of security?
The security as envisaged in the Constitution is security of lives and property.
Okay,
Now, on average, security of persons and property is achieved. And it has been going on a common say, for us we sleep, for us we sleep, for us we sleep. And part of the proof is that when you go to electoral processes, it is agreeable that NRM wins from the peasantry, because they sleep. That one is agreed. Now, I have, of course, observed that there's insecurity of persons for those political actors. Okay? And in this, I like to assert that there's a freedom which many of us in Uganda don't take it as freedom. Freedom from fear. We are supposed to live free from fear. But this may not be achieved, especially for political actors. And the basic reason is that mainly political actors wrap themselves with the law. And also, of course, due to the fact that even our law enforcement, we still have challenges. Many times you see the president has come out to condemn torture, the investigative capacity and the zeal of some cadres in intelligence. So the political actors are still, in my opinion, the small, minute population that can talk of their security, which they still live from freedom from fear. But by far, the ordinary citizen have achieved the ideal which NRM took over power for, security for lives and
maybe to just comment a little. And it happens several times when your recent cars, the drones, if any walked in any trading center, you would see people scatter. And now you're talking about freedom.
That's what I am the one who brought it. I'm the one who brought it by acknowledging that I still not that. But I said this is for the component of political actors. And I'm not saying it is good. I'm saying it must be something we should deal with so that Ugandans live free from fear. But I'm saying those are for the political actors who in most cases find themselves rubbing with the law. For example, I don't know the current status, this boy who printed the book, or who the book publisher, somebody will think
The greedy barbarian.
with the zeal, as I told you, the zeal of the cadres is that he thinks that by publishing this, you have violated this law. So that group is what I would think still would claim the lack of freedom from fear. But by far, the citizens of Uganda, we have achieved the security of passions and security of lives and properties achieved to a maximum. Now, you know, you want to, I want to talk about the issue of opposition that you have said. You see, in constitutionalism, in constitutional law, a regime which is legal is a regime. In fact, if Amin tried to overthrow Bote today, and 1 week later you tried to overthrow Amin, you'd be charged of treason, regardless of the fact that Amin himself came by illegality. So once a regime is in place, it's a regime. So that is agreed. Now, right after that, what constitutional measures are in place to ensure that we have a civil regime? We have had elections, and we continue to have elections. We vote, and we form government. Now, procedures are inbuilt there for somebody to say, no, we have this system, but it was not well done. If you want, you can exhaust those procedures to see that what is done was wrongly done. The elections that was held was wrongly held. If those procedures are exhausted, or you choose not to exhaust it, then we by far say we have a constitutionally constituted government. If we don't do this, then we leave the yardstick in everybody else's hands. And what is to you good or democratic may not be what it is to me. That is why there must be a minimum procedure of assessing it. Now, if we leave it to individuality to assess the democracy or the constitutionality, then where shall we end? We are arguing for anarchy then. So if we agreed, which Dr. Besigye has cited many constitutional provisions which the Constitution envisages, if it has envisaged this, and this is what it has set as a status quo, then what do? Failure to look at it like that simply leads to anarchy, because you will have your views, she will have her views. How then shall we end? So far, we have, therefore, a democratic system which ideally and in reality creates opposition. And they are in parliament, and there's a leader of opposition. And even in the civil society, Sarah will say she's in the opposition. She's not in parliament. So it cuts across the institutional framework in parliament to the civil society.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Paul. Let me get back to Doctor. And of course, as we are tending towards a closure, and you've talked about, of course, constitutional review, and we want to go to that. Doctor, there has been a demand for electoral reforms, of course, since 2011. And we need to ask what has been achieved so far, and what are the gaps?
You see, if we talk about electoral reforms, we must talk about whether laws work. Because electoral reforms are reforms of the laws, to make laws better laws. But do we have a system that follows the laws? Are we all equal before the law? If that is not the case, then talking about reforms is completely irrelevant. And, you know, that's why, you know, even going back to what he was talking about, saying, you know, there is security of everybody except a few who maybe are political or challenge the government in other ways. The others are not affected. That cannot simply be the case. Once you do not have a system that treats everybody similarly, that system will affect everybody. Paul, I think, comes from Lango. People of Lango, people of Acholi, people of Teso, they have been agitating up to now, having lost all their cows. And these people used to have a lot of cows and a lot of wealth, which they lost. It's not the political people that lost those cows which are being demanded up to now. It's ordinary people. They did not lose their property legally. It was grabbed. Regardless of where the problem may have started from, it impacted everybody. Land grabbing, which is going on across the country, including very significantly in areas of northern Uganda, where tracts of land are being taken and citizens, ordinary people, simply don't know what to do. You know, the people in Maruzi, the people in all these areas that had public land that has been grabbed, they don't know what to do. They have no protection, they have no voice, they have no courts to run to, because the courts are part of the institutions that are captured. So, once you have a system that is not built on equality of citizens, on the basis of which even a constitution is built, because a constitution is supposed to be built by people agreeing on that norm you talked of as the grand norm, but for themselves. That means to even have an equitable constitution, you must have equitable voices. Your voices must be present on the table and all being heard, and then you can have something that is generally agreeable to you. And that can be implemented as agreed, that everybody follows it. That there is, if you see here, we live in two countries. Those who are above the law, and those and make laws for the other ones who then they use the law to oppress. And you see it everywhere. On the roads, those who don't follow traffic laws, you are going this way, they are moving on the other lane with their sirens and telling everybody coming on their side to move away from the road and so on and so forth. That is the order of the day. So coming back to your question, and that's why there is, you cannot have security, that you have security for some, there are those who have no security. Everybody is insecure. And that's why human rights are indivisible. You cannot have, once you violate the rights of one, you really, in essence, have violated the rights of everybody. So, coming back to your question of reforms, we are living, as I pointed out, once we are in a situation where there is no rule of law, where even the captured institutions, they say, you release Sarah, and they say, we don't care what the court says. If you are in that kind of a situation, even talking about elections, the law that is there today, if it was followed as it is, it could deliver a good election. But who follows the law? So if the law, we have never had a law that provides for the military coming to arrest agents of candidates. There is no such a law. But this happens in every election. So what law will you make? What reform can you make to cause laws to be respected? What legal reform is there to ensure that the laws are respected? There is none. What the reform, therefore, is not of the law, it is of the politics. In other words, we must end that capture. We must end the captivity. That's what will cause a new dispensation to arise where we are all equal before and under the law.
So, and Dr. Right there, what is your take on the proposal to return to a parliamentary system of governance?
So for me, any representative system can work. The question is whether in our circumstance, talking about parliamentary or presidential makes a difference. It doesn't. It's diversionary. Because captives cannot have a parliament, whether there is a parliament or not, it won't serve them. So this debate is in fact introduced to just cause confusion amongst captives. Started debating something irrelevant. Because whether there is a parliamentary system or presidential system, you have no vote. So if you have no vote, how can you say whether you will vote in the presidential? We are fighting for enfranchisement. We want to have an equal vote. So all this irrelevant debate should be dismissed with the contempt it deserves. We must simply all unite to regain our power to decide in the country. We don't have that power. If you followed my campaign in 2016, when I was a candidate then, I did not tell people that I'm coming to ask you for your vote. In fact, I would come and say, people, thank you for coming. I haven't come to ask you for a vote because you have none, You have no say in what is going to happen. I've come to invite you that together we organize and work to regain our influence in this country. And that's what is needed. So this whole thing of diverting our attention on this, on that, must end. We must focus on making this country ours, having equal say in this country, recreating the systems of government, institutions of government that can serve us equitably, all of us. Today, no institution really functions on the will of the people, as is envisaged. So and that's, you have a Mr. Museveni who is occupying the office of the president, who says, I'm not the servant of anybody, and I don't care. I have brought myself where I am. I don't care about it, and he continues occupying the office. You have nothing to say. You have nothing to do. That shows you that the gravity of the situation in which we all exist. And this is not, to be fair to somebody here who is maybe appearing on behalf of NRM, whether party or whatever it is. The problem we have in Uganda is not partisan. What I'm talking about, the lack of power, the lack of authority in the country, the lack of equitable access to services and to opportunities in the country, has nothing to do with the politics. This is pre-political divisions This is fundamental, access to the state. So we all need to unite, whether you are NRM or you believe in NRM, whatever NRM, whatever is there to be believed in NRM. If you are an NRM adherent, the question comes back to you, and hopefully God sends things to wake us up. This COVID should have indeed exposed to us the need for all of us to focus on what is more important. Because whether you were NRM, they were dying here without oxygen. They were being held in hospitals. The dead bodies were being captured of NRM and they were crying. So this affects all of us. This is the demonstration, and we all need to unite, whether NRM, whether DP, whether whatever, all people need to unite and to create a new fundamental reality, not reforming. There is nothing to reform here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah. Your thoughts on this, because as it's also ending, we're getting into the closure. Your thoughts on the reforms, but also on the parliamentary system of governance.
I will make a two quick reflections on the elections. Our organization was among the accredited observers of the 2021 elections, where there were no or limited observation of elections. 28 of our colleagues were arrested on polling day while observing elections that we were accredited for. Trump charges were slapped on our data clerks, that the data center we had to monitor elections was a data center. Up to now, nobody has been produced in court. It is so if you can arrest accredited election observers who are also citizens of the country, what elections are we talking about? Many people were barred from accessing a data center in Chambogo. I know a number of journalists, just for protection of their jobs, who might not come out, that were warned by SFC. The question you asked, we shall chase you from here. The question, very many, at the National Data Center. The people who were visible at the National Data Center were military security chiefs. You can go and review the clips as elections were observed. You will see prison chiefs as if they were prisoners there. You will see police chiefs. You will see military chiefs in that data center. That explains the nature of democracy in this country. You know, there are things you cannot sugarcoat. The picture at the National Data Center demonstrates the nature of elections in this country. The second reflection point is Kayunga by-election. If you are saying you will go parliamentary system, you have no capacity to organize a mere by-election of a smaller district. For a district chairman, you deploy all the military, you arrest journalists, you arrest MPs, you arrest all agents, and by 6:30, the ballot boxes are stuffed with political ballots. So really, what kind of forare is that? To what extent can you vulgarize the people's democracy? And then you have the audacity to face cameras and say, we are a constitutional democracy. I think we should even be fair and shameful in our abilities to lie to the people. Constitutional reforms. I think we need to change the name, because even the word reform is being abused. We have had a series of constitutional mutations. And what is proposed, let me just summarize it for you. NRM out of the Buru, out of their satisfaction from Christmas, they announce, we shall return to the parliamentary system and we are appointing a constitutional review commission. So in essence, you are telling people that I'm changing the constitution, this is what I want to change, and I'm dictating what you are going to discuss. A proper discussion on the constitution should have been, because the constitution provides a time frame as to when it should be reviewed every 10 years. The framework of the 1995 constitution provided for review. you should say it's time for reviewing the constitution, and we are appointing a constitutional review commission to gather your views. Even if you have your hidden agenda, go and introduce it to the review commission. But how do you announce what you want to do and then you are directing citizens what to tell the commission? That is the vulgarization.
Thank you, sir. Finally, which on this?
On the question of the review.
You're the government here.
On the question of the review, my view is that laws, including the grand laws, norms, if you put it in practice, you see cracks. So, well over, you amend the constitution. But I've always said, and I know the NRM is alive to this fact, that when we make laws, we make an impartial law, not circumstantial laws. All of us in Uganda are alive to the case of a Bingira, who was Minister of Internal Affairs, who was told not to make Preventive Detention Act, an act which was saying if you see him about to commit, about whatever judgment is, you arrest him to prevent. They told the Bingira it wasn't good. He got a victim, and many other legislations to that. So I am saying, and these are the feelings in NRM, in that constitutions or laws are amended, but it must reflect the wills of the people. Because if you don't do it that way, sooner or later, it catches up with you. So I believe the actors should do that. Now, in particular case about the presidential system and all that, I sit in the highest organ of the party, in the SEC. I'm a director, I attend SEC. It's never mentioned anywhere. I don't know where it is coming from, so I can't comment. That is not what I've not had it any official window. So I don't know where it is coming from. You can better ask them. But apart from the fact that laws are amended the world over, I think sometimes the opposition were concerned with the amendment of the appointing of the chairman Electoral Commission. I think that has been part of the voices that are coming up. So if this was part of the voices, then why not discuss it? So the voices that are coming up, whether coming from the opposition, whether coming from NRM, if it deserves merit of discussion, it should be. But I want that we should all be alive to the impartiality of any law that we make. Okay? So that is as far as the law is concerned.
And of course, now to make your final, because now our time is fast spent, I want to discuss now, just a way forward onto, of course, our governance, and now that we are discussing the recovery of the economy. Way forward on governance and the recovery of the economy.
The way forward on governance is that I still, as a lawyer, I still believe that we have a government in place, which I insist that must rule by the will of the people. And we also should have internal checks and balances to weigh. For example, if we hear a voice, like a voice coming from Col Besigye, that does the law work, I think I would rather put it in our forum and ask my colleagues in the right forum that, what do you respond to these voices that does the law work? Are we alive to that? Should we not attend to it? Because if we are saying we are government acting in the wills of the people, so those are the issues we should attend to. But by and far, you are not going to propagate another system of removing it apart from the will of the people. And the will of people is defined as regular and free elections.
But NRM did not arise out of the will.
I explained that, in constitutional system.
Yes, so it should be the last one to do so.
I explained that I explained, that's when I mentioned about
And you were a witness.
That's where I mentioned Amin and the rest. I said, in constitutional law, when a government comes in place, it's by law government recognized.
Council theory,
Now,
if they are not arrested.
By then, the feeling is that now that we have come in place, can we give back power to the people? And how do we give it? By regular and free elections. Now, if you don't have that option of regular and free elections, the other option would be either you remove it by force, or you remove it by insurrection, or you remove it, I don't know. But what I'm saying is that way forward, the people of Uganda voted for this mandate handed over, that we are just 1 year in. Government should be alive to the feelings of the people and govern the people according to to their will. On the case of COVID, nobody has lost touch. Government is moving ahead with the challenges. So we can only call people with alternative views to continue to galvanize the people so that the people express their will, and also to continue to insist the observance of the law. Because if the cry is that I mobilize the people and the election as by law is not put in place, then let us address that. All that we should envisage is the best for the country. And I should believe that is what the movement stands for.
Thank you very much. Sarah, your final and parting shots.
Well, it's just the first month of 2022. We have survived those all of us who are alive have survived the 2 years of COVID, both via saving lives and livelihoods. Many of the families are on their knees in terms of household income. I congratulate those who have been able to return their children to school. I condone with the families where learners have lost lives due to collapsing buildings and fires due to shambolic buildings in several schools countrywide. Like it was stated before the break, I hope that God will protect our children. Because like we saw the previous disruption, there were no surveillance centers for COVID. Parliament confirmed that as much as they allocated money for surveillance centers in every district, no surveillance center has ever been put up. That's why people keep referring to the mercy of God. I know that the schools are trying their best to keep our children safe. I wish them well and I wish the learners well. As for the citizens, I think the police officer during the COVID attacks who said, "What can police do?" summarized the predicament of citizens in this country. And as Ronald Reagan said, that the most words that citizens dread of hearing is that I am from government and I am here to help. We saw the Prime Minister collapsing on her weight in an attempt to intervene in fuel prices. That is the status of your government. You're on your own.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And finally, our guest, Dr. Kiiza.
Well, first of all, I must
shots, yes.
thank the Citizens Chat show for inviting me to this conversation in which we hopefully, as we begin 2022, can invite citizens to stop lamenting, because that's, and not just citizens, because especially those who should help citizens understand better what to do, the elites, because the general population give opportunities to a few of them to gain knowledge so that that knowledge can help them get solutions to their daily problems. And so those who have, had education, have had exposure to how other countries are run and so on, have a higher responsibility. And I think, I've been very critical on our elites, myself inclusive, that really we need to do better to pull our country out of the mounting crisis in which we live. The problems of the country really need not be dwelt on, because every one of our citizens live them. The lack of health care, the challenges of education. Most kids are still at home, even as we are talking about the condition of schools and so on. So people are living real challenges in their daily lives. The question is, what do we do? And I think there must be a solution. And I think that's the call on all of us as we begin this year to rally together to provide an effective solution to end state capture and to get the people of Uganda to be in charge and to benefit as much as they can from their country, from the great gifts that God has given us. Having said that, I wish everybody really a blessed year and hopefully better lives for all of us as we grapple with all these challenges.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Of course, we also wish you the best into the year. Sarah, thank you very much for, of course, being with us here every Friday. And Awich Pollar, thank you also for his showing up and being part of these conversations. Of course, earlier on, Godber left us and he went to attend to an emergency, but at least we had him in the first part of the conversations. And to you, our viewers out there, thank you for being part of these conversations every Friday, 2 to 4 p.m. here on the chat show UG. And of course, we are discussing this there live on all our socials. And of course, you go to Facebook, we are live. We're on Twitter live, of course, the hashtags are there. And of course, on YouTube, Civic Space TV, please be part of these conversations every Friday. Subscribe to the channel. And of course, quite a lot of programming are happening. Just like Doctor said, this space here is where we share knowledge. That's where you could find a lot of knowledge. And of course, with the solutions also provided by all the people that keep coming. We are selective on who to invite. And of course, we know that at the end of the day, we'll have the solutions coming to inform and also to guide the course of actions in our day-to-day life. Thank you very much. My name has been Masesa Demiano, your show host. May God bless Uganda.